Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Benjamin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Sorry, I'm such a digital idiot, but I'm here and I've been trying to get on. But if you can see and hear me, everything is good.
Yeah, everything's good, man. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you, and thanks for your patience.
Yeah, you bet. Where are you located?
I am in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Okay, excellent. Well, hey, man, it's great to catch up with you about your music, about your life in music. Thanks for taking a minute out.
Of course, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into your latest work and your world of music, I want to know 4 years ago, this pandemic started and we were all wrapping our heads around it. I'm curious, as an artist, how did you make it through the pandemic and how did it change you?
Well, to be honest, it had quite a few consequences for me, as it did for everyone. But to be honest, for me personally, I have to admit I had a ball.
Okay.
I had the greatest time of my life almost because it gave me the opportunity to, first of all, be home with my daughters, my dogs, my wife. We have a beautiful summer house in the north of Denmark, an old country farmhouse from 1777. Old piece of shit, but beautiful place where we went. The kids, they were in school online, and we were just hanging out and having a good time. I got rid of all the airports and sound checks and traveling, which have been a big part of my life for decades. And suddenly I had the opportunity to go back to my youth and childhood big passion, which is writing.
Yeah.
And I always, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a writer. And in the fall of 2018, I began writing a novel, which I thought, hey, this could last like 10 years, or maybe I would never finish it. But then came the pandemic, and then suddenly I had the time to write my novel, and I finished my novel during the pandemic. And I released it in May 2022, and it became nothing less but the greatest success in Denmark. And it's been, I mean, been awarded with number of prizes and awards, and has become one of the best-selling novel debuts in Danish literature. So it was kind of just exploded.
Wow.
And now it's just coming out in German, and it looks very good in Germany as well. And the movie rights has been sold, and it's going to be made into a movie and a theatrical play as well. And so it, for that reason, I had a ball. But of course, on a serious background, since the pandemic both cost people their lives, their homes, their jobs, money, death, all that. So it was serious for so many people. But for me personally, it was an opportunity that I am so thankful for having achieved.
So talk to me a little bit about what's been going on. I know you have a new single, Absurd, that's out. Talk to me a little bit about new work that's out and how it was influenced by whether it was the pandemic or coming out of it, this post-pandemic era. Talk to me a little bit about your latest work.
Well, I'm quite productive. So this spring I'm releasing 3 albums,
Okay.
and Story of Mankind is one of them, which is a requiem that I wrote, a mass for the dead, but also a mass for the living. It's a double album inspired by a Danish world-renowned photographer, war photographer, Jan Grarup, who he's been, in war zones for 30 years, depicting and photographing, documenting horrors and wars. And uh, ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, he has been back to Ukraine a number of times and photographing and documenting the horrors of that war. And his photographs, I saw them, some of them, and I was really, grabbed by them because they're so powerful and terrible. And the very interesting thing was Jan Karup's pictures, they are like almost one-to-one alike with photographs from World War One. It's the same trenches, the same burnt trees, the same faces on the soldiers. It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And these photographs inspired me to write this Requiem, A Story of Mankind, where I took lyrics from French poet Guillaume Apollinaire, who himself fought in World War One and was wounded fatally in World War One. He died from his wounds, and some of his writings and poems that are set into music, as well as two Danish now living poets, a poet called Morten Søndergaard and a poetry slammer called T.T. Thomas Krag. And I set their texts into music and wrote this requiem and recorded it with a stellar cast, with a fantastic Danish singer, Frederik Vedel, trumpet legend, old friend Randy Brecker, drummer Ferenc Nemeth from Hungary, and Danish cello player Henrik Dam Thomsen, piano player Søren Møller, and Swedish bass player Johnny Oman. So really a stellar cast that really made this music come to life. And it's a double album. It's 100 minutes of music, and it's kind of dark, and it's really like heavy, but it's also hopefully has some kind of hope in there.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of my comment on the atrocities of war, and in through art and through music, trying to questioning why war is and has always been such an important matter of humanity. Why do we keep on killing each other? What's the purpose? And it seems we don't get any smarter,
Right.
even though years pass and we see that every war only brings casualties and death and terrible atrocities. So so that's one of the projects, and Absurd is the first single from that album.
So yeah,
And
war it's like the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over with the same results. It just
totally,
doesn't make any sense. But I think that's the beauty of artists out there, is that there's not this inherent responsibility, but I think it's very valorous for those that decide that they want to make a statement, because I think art did historically, when we look at artists, when they do put out their work and make commentary and get people involved, it can make real change.
yeah. And for me, I think first of all, I had to do something because I saw these pictures from World War One and from Ukraine today, and I mean, nothing has happened. Yes, the technology of war has improved, but fundamentally, it's about the same thing: killing the other guys
Yeah.
and destroying their homes and destroying the possibilities of anyone ever living at that particular place again. So nothing has changed at all, except for the technology and maybe sometimes also the speed or the horror in which way the way we kill each other. But fundamentally, it's the same as wars were like 1,000 years ago or
Yeah.
2,000 years ago. It's the same shit.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend that my music can stop the war at all. But for me, it was important to make this statement. And also, I think what art can do is in some way try to nivellate, if that's a word in English, try to, balance. I think that's a word I'm looking for. Try to balance all the evil that is taking place all over us in the world. So I
Yeah.
think art can at least try to balance some of all that terrible shit that's going on, and maybe, and the hope is green, but maybe, just change somebody's approach to life, or maybe challenge somebody's empathic skills or whatever. So I think there's a hope in there, and definitely we need to, to keep hoping, really,
Yeah.
for humanity, even though it's the same story over and over again. We need to keep on hoping.
The
And art
only
is that.
Yeah, the world's only World War One monument is actually here in Kansas City, Missouri. We house it here.
Really
Yeah. Yeah, it's a full
interesting.
museum and a monument, and that's where we have all of our parades, and it's kind of a central point by our Union Station. So anyway, you had mentioned World
Fantastic.
War One a few times, so
Yeah, exactly. And and I mean, Ukraine is it's like 1,200 kilometers from me, or 1,400 kilometers from here. It's like less than 1,000 miles away from where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in my beautiful garden here.
yeah, I love it.
I have my dogs here. Maybe you can see.
Yeah.
I have two dogs. this is paradise for me. I'm
Yes.
so privileged, and yet less than 1,000 miles from here, people are experiencing war,
Yeah,
atrocities, hell in 2024. It's unbelievable,
I know.
and and I can't go down there and pick up a gun. I would never pick up a gun, and I mean, that would be hopeless. So the thing I can do is try to put it into kind of an artistic context, and kind of wave that flag of hope and brotherly love or humanitarian love, even though it sounds hippie like or saved, but it's really, it comes from a genuine place.
So talk to me about your book. What is it about? I mean, it obviously hit well and it's getting made
It
into a movie.
it did. It's called in Danish Anna's Sang, or Anna's Song, and it's a novel, but fictionalized, but it's based on the life of my grandfather's kid sister, who was called Anna, and whom I didn't know. I was very good friends with my grandfather. He and his three brothers, they were children of Polish Jewish immigrants who came to Copenhagen in 1907, and they had fled the Russian pogroms. Speaking of war, um, as so many Eastern European Jews did in around the turn of the century back then. And the hope was to go to New York, but the money only got them to Copenhagen, and they settled here. And and they, my grandfather and his three brothers, they became musicians, um, living a pretty good life in the 30s in Copenhagen. But then came Second World War. Speaking of, Denmark was occupied by Nazi Germany April 9th, 1940. And in 43, the family had to escape to Sweden, escape from, getting into the concentration camps. And long story short, when I grew up, I was very friendly with my grandfather, and I knew his three brothers, but I never knew that they had a kid sister. And when I went to my grandfather's mother, they said my great grandmother, I'm spacing a little bit in English, but my grandfather's mother,
Yeah.
when she passed, I went to a funeral, and somebody talked about it was offensive that Anna didn't show up to her mother's funeral. I suddenly realized when I was 10 years old, there's an extra kid. And I asked my father about her, and he said that he didn't really know her. She was peculiar and weird, and had lived her life in Paris since after the World War II. And yeah, she had cut the cord to the family. And then my grandfather died from age in late 1990s, and then I began, contemplating on looking her up, because I knew she was still alive, the last one from that generation. And I looked her up and in Paris, and became very good friends with her. And turned out she wasn't weird, she wasn't peculiar, but she had a quite intense story that she told me. We became very good friends. I visited her many, many times, and she gave me very generously her story, and I fictionalized that into this novel. And it turned out she had been forced, against her will and her love of her heart. She had been forced by my great grandparents to marry a man in an arranged marriage. Is that the term in English as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah.
Yeah, and for that reason, she had to go to Paris and live in this terrible marriage. Um,
Wow.
and so that story,
Yeah.
and she wanted to be a pianist, as her brothers were musicians. She, entered the conservatory in Copenhagen in the 1930s. Had a dream of becoming an international pianist, which she definitely had the talent for. And she was in love with the Danish non-Jewish man that she wasn't allowed to get. And all these dreams she had to cast aside, because she had to fulfill the demands and obligations of the family,
Wow.
especially because the four older brothers all married non-Jewish Danish girls. So they kind of got away with it, but she was a woman, and so she had to uh, comply with the family orders, kind of. So it's a story about oppression of the female, but it's also a story about giving up the hopes and dreams of your life, and still trying to make the best of it.
Wow.
That's
Speaking of
very,
hope,
very short.
yeah, yeah, no, I
Excuse me.
like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Speaking of hopes and dreams, how did this jazz dream and journey, how did it happen for you?
Well, I began playing drums when I was 5 years old. My father is a musician. My grandfather, as I just said, was a classical pianist and composer. My father is a composer and Hammond organ player, and so there was always music. Um, and when I was 5 years old, I began playing drums. Bernard Purdy and Steve Gadd were my big heroes, and I banged everything, and so I was just banging the pots and pans, and it was so my parents gave me a small kids drum set, and then when I was 9, I began playing piano. I was taught by my grandfather, and then when I was 12, I heard a concert in the television. I saw a concert with Tower of Power, the American funk rock band,
Yeah.
and there was a 5-minute unaccompanied sax solo by Richard Elliott, which just blew me away. I was 12 years old. I was like, this is it. I want to try to play that horn, and then I began playing saxophone. And at the same time, I began working in a Danish record store in Copenhagen called Rille. Um, Really, it's the groove of an LP or a vinyl. So that's the name of it. And I was paid in vinyls. So every time I'd worked an hour, I could choose one LP from the stacks, which was heaven for me.
Yeah.
And then I, discovered Sonny Rollins, Johnny Hodges, Parker, Charlie Parker, Benny Carter, all those cats. At the same time, I began playing saxophone, and that was just my way into jazz. And I just wanted to get to learn that vocabulary, that language, and just practice the hell out of it because it was so much fun, and it still is. So, and then I was so fortunate as to win a big jazz competition in Copenhagen when I was 18 years old, and the first prize was getting to record in a real studio and having released an album, a CD at that time. So I released my debut album when I was 18, and that really took off and gave me the possibility to further explore jazz and music also as a professional.
So what do you like the best about being a professional musician?
What do I like the best? Well, for me, I've been so extremely privileged because I've gotten to play with, I was almost about to say, almost all of my heroes. I mean, I've been recording with Charlie Mariano and Paul Bley and Phil Woods. I played with Lee Konitz. I even played with Jim Hall. A lot of amazing musicians, artists, great people that I've got to know and got to play with. So that is probably, the thing that really stands out for me. All these amazing musicians that I've been in room with, playing with, have been given the opportunities to learn from. I've been having a trio collective with my two very dear friends, bassist Scott Colley and drummer Brian Blade, for more than 10 years, 12 years now. We get together on and off, and to be able to get into these kind of relationships musically as well as on a almost a family like level, it's so amazing. And that's probably what I enjoy the most about being a musician, to get the opportunity to learn from so many amazing musicians, because it's for me it's an ongoing process of learning. I've instinctively I try to move forward. I don't care much about looking back. I try to look forward and see what's behind the next corner or under the next rock. What can I learn? How can I be challenged or challenge myself?
So what has been the key to your longevity? You've obviously stayed relevant. You played with your heroes. You continue to create music. What has been that motivation? What has been that, how has the dream continued for so long?
Well, I think uh, a mixture of curiosity and a lot of ideas, and probably also not enjoying watching television that much. I have a lot of friends. They watch a lot of television series, and I don't have patience for it at all. So I haven't watched any series at all. So I'm really focused on inventing and trying out things. So I've had a lot of ideas always, and thankfully that combined with the opportunity to actually see these ideas come to life, have possibilities of, of settings where I can see what they're about, put people together. For instance, I've been curating and being the artistic director of an annual, or actually twice a year annual jazz festival in Copenhagen, winter jazz and summer jazz, where I set the program and have been doing that for 15 years with bringing a lot of people, trying out new situations, groups. So I think the longevity comes for me as long as there are ideas in my head, and there really are a lot of ideas. That kind of is a fuel for me to bring them to life. And also I have to bring them to life because otherwise they become kind of a dead weight that kind of shadows for new ideas. So every time I have an idea, I have to try it out and either cast it away or fulfill it somehow in order to make space for new ideas.
So let's say a time machine pulls up when we get off this call in front of your house, and you can go anywhere in history and see one jazz performance. Where are you going?
Well, that's a difficult one because my saxophone heroes, my three first ones was Johnny Hodges, Benny Carter, and Charlie Parker. Earl Bostic is another one. Coltrane and Rollins, of course, Cannonball. But actually, if I could go back, I would probably go back to Louis Armstrong Hot Five.
Yeah.
Because they kind of invented everything.
Yeah.
And as much as I love all the names I just gave you, and hundreds of more amazing musicians whose work we all stand on, the shoulders of, I think it all really started with the genius of Armstrong and the Hot Five.
Yeah.
Because the way he and they at the time invented swing and melody, phrasing, rhythm, all that still baffles me the same way Mozart does, or it's kind of the fundamental DNA of our music.
Yeah.
So my answer would probably right now it would be Armstrong Hot Five, 1927 or something.
Well, then let's get into the good business of your live shows coming up. Your albums are coming out. Let everybody know where they can get the albums, find out about live shows, any of the good business.
Well, on Thursday, I go on a European tour with my project Art of the Quartet, which has been kind of a group that has been, changing shapes, but really is based on a jazz quartet, me on saxophone, piano, bass, drums, in various settings, various musicians. I made an album, a double album with Scott Colley, Kenny Werner, and Jack DeJohnette a few years ago. It's coming out on vinyl actually this year in the fall. 3 albums. So it's been taking different shapes, but now I'm going on a quartet tour out of the quartet with 3 American amazing musicians: Kevin Hayes, piano; James Genius, bass; and Antonio Sanchez, drums, which I'm looking very much forward to. We have a 10 or 12 days hit or something like that. And then comes our new album, an album that I've been recording with my father, Anders Koppel, on Hammond organ, myself and drummer Brian Blade on drums, a trio album, which is coming out as well, entitled Time Again. And then comes my jazz festival, Summer Jazz, in the end of June in Copenhagen, where we have a lot of different projects. I'm bringing in Jeff Ballard, Scott Colley, Ralph Alessi, Uri Kane, a lot of amazing people from the States, as in musical meetings with Danish musicians as well. So I'm looking very much forward to that. So there are a lot of projects coming up, and hopefully I'm gonna release a new novel in Danish in the fall as well. Right now I'm in the midst of editing it, and so we'll see when I'll be done with that. But hopefully for the fall.
Yeah, this is great, man. I love the story. Best of luck with the movie and the tour and the album.
Oh, thanks.
I look forward to spinning it on the show. It's so great to meet you, Benjamin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the patience and for excusing my digital analphabecy. I'm so thankful for this. Thank you so much.